seconds away on Studio 5, from facing darkness to finding light.
David looked at me and he said, "You too have Ebola."
Your first look at the documentary of the American missionaries caught in the middle of the Ebola crisis. And fighting the Ebola virus is just one of the odds this doctor had to overcome.
You have to be different, and it's exciting, even though people may laugh at you, may call you names. Jesus was different.
Antonio Webb shares his prescription for resilience then.
3 days after I'd hit my head, I couldn't walk straight, I had blurry vision, I couldn't hold conversation.
Doctors said she'd never graduate from high school. Today, she's a singer and songwriter with a college degree. See how she found hope after head injury and how she's helping others to do the same. Welcome to Studio 5. As you see, we have a full show jam-packed with uplifting entertainment stories. We don't want to waste a minute, so let's jumpstart that countdown of the 5 big headlines, bringing smiles to our faces this week. Here's number 5 and number 4. At number 5. Lecrae drops the video for his new single, Blessings.
I've been punching in the clock, trying to keep the kitchen stocked. Man, it's a blessing because we ain't never had a lot, but all we need is all we got. If I ever took a loss, I learned a lesson.
This collaboration with Ty Dolla $ign is expected to be on his next album, his first on Columbia Records.
Reaching Columbia partners for me, and a lot of reason for that is to kind of take some of the pressure off Reach Records to focus on all these other artists and projects and allow Columbia to just kind of take a lot of the weight. So I'm excited. I've been in the studio working and we'll see what happens.
At number 4.
Say Stella! Stella!
The 32nd Annual Stellar Awards for Gospel Music are handed out in Las Vegas. And congratulations to Brianna Babineau. This social media sensation and friend of Studio 5 won New Artist of the Year and Contemporary Female Vocalist of the Year.
I'm a worshiper at heart. When I singing is, I refer to my singing as prayers. These are my prayers to God.
That's a look at the first 2. We have 3 more headlines to get to before the end of the show. Right now, we turn to the deadly Ebola outbreak. It swept through parts of West Africa in 2014. The treacherous journey to abolishing the disease won't soon be forgotten. Filmmakers from the humanitarian organization Samaritan's Purse produced a gripping documentary titled Facing Darkness. It's the miraculous story of the American medical missionaries who contracted the disease in Liberia and stood at death's door. Here's your first look.
This was an unfolding catastrophe.
The numbers of new cases and deaths are still rising.
It's certainly clear in the film this was a difficult time for your ministry. Why share this story on film?
So many people that were involved in fighting Ebola there in Liberia and Guinea and Sierra Leone were young people. And I want the world to see what God did and how He used the lives of young people to fight the world's most deadly virus.
My phone rang, and Ken Isaacs said one of our doctors, Kent Brantley, has Ebola.
This is a story how God saved Dr. Brantley.
To be honest, not a day goes by that I don't think about Liberia and about our experience.
Dr. Kent Brantley says while it's a bit uncomfortable seeing himself on the big screen, this allows him to remember God's faithfulness.
I think there's a reason that God told the people of Israel, tell your children we were slaves in Egypt. I think there's something really important about remembering the hard times we've been through and remembering what God has done in our lives to help inform the way we move forward.
My greatest fear is that I would have to raise my kids alone.
Dr. Brantley and his wife, Amber, had already been serving in Liberia for a year when the Ebola epidemic hit. His diagnosis came just days after Amber left on a short trip with their children back home to the States.
My prayers in those days were very simple. My prayers are, God, help me to be faithful. I really think my prayer for my children in that moment when I didn't think I was going to live, my prayer was that I would be faithful, that they would have a legacy of a father who was faithful, even in his death.
The story of Facing Darkness is definitely an epic one. There are so many stories and so many threads. And it was really, really hard to figure out how to whittle it down. Our editor was able to find some of the most powerful sound bites and the most powerful portions of people's stories and put them together. And so we were, that's one of the ways we were able to get through that.
The production team hopes the film will challenge audiences.
I hope people will leave the theater asking themselves, would I be that brave? What would I do?
You don't have to look far in the news today to find places where we are faced with fear. And I think something that this film can help us do is to look at those circumstances in our lives in the world today through a different lens and say, what does it look like if we choose not to respond out of the fear we feel, but instead we have the courage to move forward in compassion.
If we're willing to put our faith and trust in God's Son, Jesus Christ, if He's in our boat, we don't have to worry about that boat sinking. He'll take us through that storm, and He did with Dr. Brantley. And I want the world to see what God did. At the same time, I'm hoping God will use this to bring up an army of young people who will say, here I am, send me.
That film is in theaters for a special one-day Fathom event, March 30th. Still ahead on Studio 5.
What do you remember about your mom growing up?
My mom and my sister have schizophrenia. Not a lot of people know this and don't talk about it a lot because I actually just found out about it when I was in medical school, learning about different psychiatric drugs.
Dr. Antonio Webb's journey to success despite insurmountable odds. And welcome back to Studio 5. It's time for a look at the next two headlines in our weekly countdown of uplifting entertainment news stories. At number 3. You guys don't do anything small, do you?
Yeah, this redefines epic, doesn't it?
Following the epic Ben-Hur, Variety reports Mark Burnett and Roma Downey are developing a scripted religious drama for Netflix titled Messiah. Set in modern-day Middle East, the series will follow the world's reaction to a man performing miracles. Now to number 2.
Have you been keeping secrets from me?
No one knows how hard it is.
Jessica Chastain leads the cast of the new film, The Zookeeper's Wife.
World War II, when her zoo is bombed and they're forcing the Jews into the ghetto, she and her husband decide to risk their lives and the lives of their children to smuggle people out of the ghetto and hide them in the zoo.
It's based on a true story set in 1939 Poland.
What have you been up to in your little zoo?
And that leaves only one more story in the countdown. Stick with us for that one. Dr. Antonio Webb is another physician who spent time fighting Ebola in West Africa. He shares his journey in the book, Overcoming the Odds. I sat down with him for this week's Studio 5 interview. Liberia is where Georgetown University student Antonio Webb began his career in medicine, and he arrived at an unforgettable time.
We got to the hospital our first day in country, and I saw people running around kind of frantic-y and kind of worried and concerned. Found out that there was an Ebola outbreak. The people of Liberia, they really need our help. The hospital didn't have a lot of supplies that I needed. That's the first place that I actually lost a patient, was in Liberia as a new doctor. That was very heartbreaking.
Heartbreak was a bit too familiar for the young doctor. It came early and often, as a child, growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana.
A lot of my friends definitely went to prison. Most of them were killed or are currently in jail to this day.
Were there things you should have gone to jail for?
Absolutely, yeah.
Photos paint a picture of childhood. Antonio as a baby, snapshots with grandma and his two brothers. Not many with his mom and sister.
I would say since I was younger, she's been in and out of the hospital maybe 30, 40 times, in and out of jail maybe 10, 15, 20 times. So never knew why. I always just knew that something was a little bit off and something was wrong, but I never knew why.
When did you figure out what was wrong?
4 years ago.
4 years ago?
Yeah.
And what's wrong?
My sister has schizophrenia. Not a lot of people know this and don't talk about it a lot because I actually just found out about it when I was in medical school, learning about different psychiatric drugs. She called one day and said she was taking her medicine. So I said, "What medications are you taking?" And she told me the name of the medication, and it just hit me. I just remembered everything from the years of her trying to commit suicide and on drugs and in and out of the hospital. I kind of put those two together, and that's when I found out.
Mom's trouble was Antonio's drive to work harder, juggling high school and a job.
I think I was actually 15, and I kind of changed the date on these certificates so I can start working. I wanted to work that bad, and they actually gave me the job.
Staying busy didn't keep trouble away from the Webb boys. Antonio's youngest brother, Jonathan, was a computer whiz.
Actually, the FBI raided our house because of a computer operation that he was running.
What was he doing?
Yeah.
At what age is he?
I think he was 14 or 15.
14 and the
Yeah.
FBI is after?
Yeah, they shut down the whole street and raided our house.
What are you doing at 14 with a computer that would spark?
After that ordeal, he started hanging around the wrong crowd, and he ended up going to jail for armed robbery. At 16 years old, they gave him juvenile life for armed robbery.
And you go to jail to visit him?
Yeah.
And you're saying that was one of the toughest things you had to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just seeing him in prison, walking up in an orange jumpsuit and chains, shackles on his feet and also his hands. But one thing I would never forget is his big smile that he had. So he never stopped smiling. So he came up to the counter and he said he wanted to sing a song that he's been writing songs and writing raps, like a Christian song. And the song was called Love. Basically, he started singing and basically tears ran down my eyes. I couldn't hold it in. Just seeing him behind the wall, I couldn't hug him, couldn't touch him.
Jonathan died in 2008 as Antonio followed in the footsteps of his older brother, Chris, and his father in the military.
My dad's my role model. Look up to him a lot. He had a troubled childhood himself, selling drugs and using drugs. He went to prison when he was younger for lots of different crimes that he committed.
Dad is now a minister and Antonio's biggest supporter. It's a generational story of overcoming the odds Dr. Webb shares in his book.
I knew I wanted change. That's probably the most important thing for me was I didn't want to be like my family members, my friends. I wanted to be different. That's one thing about me. I always want to be different. So that's why I stuck to the books, and it's paid off now.
You encourage people to be different in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to be different in this society, even though people may laugh at you, may call you names. Jesus was different. So I encourage everyone to be different.
Dr. Webb is an amazing man. His book, Overcoming the Odds, is available right now. Up next on Studio 5, sitting down with singer Cristabelle Braden.
After my brain injury, my whole personality changed. So my parents describe me now as like an identical twin to the person I was before.
See how brain injury helped her discover her true identity. And welcome back to Studio 5. It is now time for the #1 story in this week's countdown. And at #1, the miracle continues.
Some great news for J.R. Smith and his wife. Their baby, who was born 5 months premature, is about to cross the 3-pound mark, and she just had her breathing tube removed, which is a big, big deal.
Back in January, Cleveland Cavaliers' J.R. Smith asked fans and followers to pray for his daughter, Dakota, who was born 5 months early, weighing only 1 pound.
The nurses said she's doing so well that we removed her tube and you could hold her without the breathing tube. It is a tremendous accomplishment. She's making amazing progress.
And with that, we wrap the countdown, but not the show. The next story is sure to encourage and inspire. Cristabelle Braden is a singer, songwriter, and survivor of multiple brain injuries. Her latest project is called Hope Survives. And from the very first note, you will know why she is this week's Studio 5 one to watch.
With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives.
This project is called Hope Survives. I had a really serious traumatic brain injury just over 9 years ago. And I had to relearn how to get myself dressed, how to take a shower, my vocabulary. The doctors at the time told my parents I'd most likely never graduate high school or ever be independent.
Wow.
And today I'm a college graduate. So, you know, it's, the Lord always has a plan.
You choose to focus on brain injury and to spend this time on this tour because why?
There's so many people walking around with this invisible illness. My goal is to be a voice for brain injury, to let survivors and caregivers know that you're not alone, that we all walk through these journeys, and it's okay to have it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have these symptoms. Don't let it define you.
Absolutely.
And so on this tour, on the Hope Survives tour, I've been traveling around to different hospitals and support groups and brain injury rehab centers, and just also doing concerts at churches. Just being able to spend time and hear their stories and hear so many people's journeys through brain injury, it inspires me. I feel like I'm more blessed by doing this than anything.
Let's talk about the music. You have an amazing voice.
Thank you.
Were you singing before the accident?
I was, yeah. No, I preferred acting over singing, so I only sang to be in musicals. After my brain injury, I couldn't memorize anymore. You've seen Finding Nemo, you know Dory?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's not an exaggeration. I would literally forget that I ate breakfast, go in the other room, and be like, oh, it's morning, and go back and eat another bowl of cereal. And then I'd put the milk away in the pantry, and the cereal away in the refrigerator, and, you know, trying to get dressed, I'd put my socks on over my shoes, because, you know, I knew it went on my foot, but I just didn't remember what order. All these things were just jumbled up and mixed up, and we had a piano. I had taken piano lessons as a kid, but I quit by the time I was 10. Like, I was just not interested. It was too hard work to practice. But I started to write songs, and I brought my parents these rhyming lyrics, these deep spiritual rhyming lyrics. I brought them over, and I couldn't read back to my parents what I'd written. So I couldn't cross the street by myself. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I might not be able to get myself dressed, but I started writing songs.
So did you write all the songs on this?
I did, yep, everyone.
Every single one. You have a favorite?
Probably my favorite's Hope Survives.
Hope survives.
How long did it take to write that?
Well, that song I actually wrote within like 45 minutes one day. I looked up at the stars and I just heard in my head, I took a step and I heard, with a little hope you can make it through today. And I took another step and I heard, with a little faith someday you'll get through the pain. And I was like, okay. And I got back to my dorm and I was like, what song is that? I'm looking through my iTunes, like trying to figure out what it is. And it was not any song. And I knew I was supposed to write it. So I went to our music building and they have piano rooms, practice rooms. And I sat down and just wrote it, put it out as a single. I started to get all these emails and messages like flooding my inbox about how this song was affecting different people with brain injuries. I just was like, all right, so everyone who sent me an email and different people, we created a music video with holding up how hope survives in their life.
Hope survives.
What's next for you?
The world usually likes to tell us to be yourself and, you know, follow your heart and do what you want to do and like be yourself and all these things. But if yourself can change from one hit to the head, then that's not who you are. We identify ourselves as what we like, what we don't like, our Facebook profile, what we put in about me, right? You put in what you like. But that's not about me. Like, I've had to learn that I'm a child of God, and that's my identity, and nothing can take that away from me or anybody. Like, a brain injury could happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
For me, because of that and because of everything I know that God has me in the palm of his hand, just like he has all of us there.
Absolutely.
And I try to every day just walk out step by step where he would have me go and just listen.
Cristabelle's project Hope Survives is available now. You should be sure to check it out. And check out our foundation, Hope After Head Injury. Still ahead on Studio 5, words of wisdom from Priscilla Shirer.
The unrest and the lack of peace and the lack of joy and all the stuff that so many of us in our personal private lives are facing, I just think because we just haven't dropped the anchor down.
An encouraging word when we return. And where does the time go? Now time to look at what we're working on for next week's Studio 5.
Look, we've been friends for a long time, but some things are just none of your business.
T.C. Stallings lit up the screen in the box office surprise War Room. The athlete-turned-actor is in Studio 5 next week. How did you make the transition? Was acting always in you?
It was in me as a hobby. It was in me as fun, you know, in church where you go do the Sunday plays.
He's talking film, faith, and fitness. That's just one story from next week's rundown. It is now time for the final word in this show. And we turn to Bible teacher Priscilla Shirer, who is dropping anchor.
I constantly remind myself that we have an anchor, that an anchor is what literally holds you steady, even when the waves are pushing you to the left or the right. We have this little pond at my neighbor's house, and I'll take the boys. Just this week, I went with one of my sons over there. We got into their little rowboat that they have. We went out into the middle of the pond. We rowed out there, and it was a little bit windy, so we kept getting pushed over to the side. And JC noticed this weight that had a rope around it, just like a hand dumbbell that the owners of the boat had put in there. He'd noticed it. We'd been struggling so hard to stay in the middle of the water. We kept being pushed over to the shoreline, and he finally noticed it, and it had a rope attached to it. He said, "Mom, I'm gonna drop this down, and I'm gonna hang on to the rope up here, drop it down." And once he did that, all of our struggling stopped. We didn't have to work so hard anymore to keep from being pulled and tugged, and the unrest and the lack of peace and the lack of joy and all the stuff that so many of us in our personal private lives are facing. I just think because we just haven't dropped the anchor down deeply into the Word of God in prayer, trusting Him, reminding ourselves that just because the world seems like it's in turmoil does not mean our God is not still on the throne.
That word reminds me of an old song my grandmother, Beatrice Graham, still sings today. In times like these, you need a Savior. In times like these, you need an anchor. Be very sure your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. That is the final word for this show. Until next time, reach out and touch me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And then come on back and see where Studio 5 takes you next week. Bye-bye.